You know, I really didn't expect to update this list this year, but I woke up this morning and said, why not? Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back to talk a little horror today, as spooky season is wrapping up on the channel. But something I did a while back, 2020 I believe, I made a list of my top 10 horror novels of all time. Didn't expect very much because my audience is mostly sci-fi and fantasy, but it has become the most popular video on my channel. I constantly have people asking me, are you ever going to update that list? And I was saying I don't think I've read enough new horror novels to really make changes to that list. But I feel like now I've read some new things, some other things have moved in, some have moved out, some things have stayed the same, but I do feel like there is enough changes in that list now that I could probably make an adjustment. Also, there is a rule that I have when I do lists like this, and lots of people don't like it. What I'll tell you guys is this is my list. When you make your list, make your own rules, so please just not let that be the one thing that dominates this. Is I only put one book per author on here, because I feel like if I was making a top 10 horror novels and 5 out of 10 of them were Stephen King books, I feel like, okay, so how about you just call it my favorite Stephen King books and more? You know, I don't want to do that. So guys, that's why I want to start with some honorable mentions, and obviously 3 of those are going to be Stephen King books. These are the ones that might have actually cracked into the top 10 or might have in the last list. Pet Sematary was on the 2020 list. It will not be on this one because of this new rule. The Shining and Salem's Lot 3, legendary Stephen King books when you're known as the master of horror as he was in the 1980s. Obviously, there's going to be lots of books that would be on this list. Obviously, he's one of the ones who brought me to find a love in this genre. But just going to keep them to honorable mentions here just to kind of follow my own rules. A couple that fell off of the list from 2020. And I don't want you to think that these books are less than. I really do still love these books. I'm talking about The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson and, of course, Jaws by Peter Benchley. 2 books I do really, really love. It's just when you're coming down to top 10, you got to get the best of the best. There's going to be some tough cuts on there. And guys, go back and watch that 2020 video if you want to know why I love those books as well. But let's go ahead and move into the list proper here. A new entrant, a first timer on a list like this. Number 10, I got to go with The Troop by Nick Cutter. Now, this is an author that a lot of viewers had been kind of sending me his books. They sent me The Deep, they sent me The Troop, and they sent me Little Heaven. Now, I've read 2/3 of those. I read The Troop last year, guys, and I absolutely loved it. I felt like it was very much Stephen King around the Carrie phase. It's kind of what it felt like a hat tip to, and I can see why so many Stephen King fans had recommended Nick Cutter to me and actually sent me some of his books, because this one hit all of those things that I love. You got your young protagonist, you got your a group of young kids that talk to each other and gets that dialogue right about the way that kids actually talk to each other and kind of, having to come of age under severe duress. And that's just a creepy, creepy book. Feels like a little bit of John Carpenter's The Thing in there. So, you got your paranoia, who is infected, who is not, that kind of thing. And it has some of the grossest, most awful body horror that I've read in very many more recent books, and it's really, really well done, and I had a great time, as you can with a story such as that with that book, and it made me want to read more Nick Cutter. I read Little Heaven this year and really liked it, but I didn't like it as much as I liked The Troop, so because obviously The Troop's going to make my top 10 horror books of all time. It left quite an impression, and I would recommend it to everybody, but I will say there are some things in there that are very, very difficult to read, but again, if you're reading horror, I feel like you should know that. You're going to be going into some things. You're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable at times. But he does cross a line with some animal cruelty in that. I know that's been kind of a big criticism of it, but I felt like it plays into the theme of the story. So I don't want to say it didn't bother me, but it didn't bother me to the point to where I would call it a negative on the book. Number 9, kind of a cheat here, I guess you would say, because when we're talking about the apple and the apple not falling far from the tree, it's not a Stephen King book, but it is son of Stephen, Joe Hill. This is Heart-Shaped Box. Read this a couple of Halloweens ago for spooky season, and I was completely floored. Didn't read this when it came out. Don't really exactly know why. I think I went into it when I reviewed this book a few years ago. But this was one that was just, I kind of just didn't really hit it when it came out. I read Nosferatu, but I never really got to this one. And when I finally did, I was completely blown away by what I got and surprised at just how eerie it was. There's one scene where our protagonist is kind of in the living room and you see like a ghostly appearance kind of thing, like sitting in the chair. And that one chapter just completely turned my blood cold. Really, really good. And I love that he plays with animal familiars and things in that book. So to me, that was one of those where it's like, look, is Joe Hill ever going to fill those shoes? Obviously, his big shoes his father has handed his way. No, of course not. But it does feel like, yeah, but you know what? He paid attention when Dad was telling bedtime stories because his work is very good. I've only read Nosferatu, Heart-Shaped Box, and Lock and Key, but I have loved all of them. The Fireman is one I've been kind of kicking down the road here for a while, but Joe Hill, very good. I think he's doing great work in comics. He really is. But I do hope he gets back to writing some novels again soon because I feel like he is very, very good at it, especially now that his dad is letting him play around in the multiverse, and I feel like we do have a successor in place for when that time inevitably, sadly, does come. Number 8, I have The Willows by Algernon Blackwood. Now, this is the book that kind of makes you realize, why are the woods so damn scary? Because you think about the woods at night, there's so much going on that always feels like there's something hiding behind every tree, or what was that noise kind of thing. I think he captures all that really, really well. Captures a lot of paranoia, and I think paranoia is what makes a book like that really, really work. These two campers, they start to suspect one another. They start to wonder what's going on outside the tent at night. It's really, really creepy vibes, and you can see what Algernon Blackwood, that's the one that scared H.P. Lovecraft when he was younger, and he read Algernon Blackwood, and it scared him. So I think that's the highest compliment you can get. Like when Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top said that, or Jimi Hendrix said that Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top was his favorite guitar player, that's respect of your peers, right? And so when H.P. Lovecraft says that Algernon Blackwood is the one that scared him, I can absolutely see why with The Willows. Not a very long read at all. It's one of those, it's just like, I look back at like the first 30 pages of that, and it just sets the tone so good. And you just feel the dread immediately. And you can see that that is where Lovecraft got a lot of his ideas from. And obviously, the way that you set the tone for a story like that. Here is a returning nominee here. This is number 7, The Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. One of my favorite vampire books of all time. Interview with the Vampire is so great because it explores so many things about what that change in life is like. Obviously, you're going to be not just, okay, cool, I can't see the sun anymore. It's just this character is just battling with the little bit of humanity that he has left. And, every time you think that he's going to leave Lestat, you see that he is just such a manipulative force, and that he brings a child into this to kind of make the character stay. And it just deals with all those things about how lonely of a life this actually becomes, when you can't get attached to anybody else that's not a vampire, because you're going to live forever, they're going to die, and it's just a very, very lonely life. But there's several things in it that are very, very scary. You think about the theater of the vampires, that stuff is really, really scary, but it's really more about the scares of, parenthood. I think it really kind of touches on some of those things, which is what I love about Pet Sematary. It deals with a lot of the other things that you would think of outside of the actual, hey, this is a big scary vampire, but several things in this book are very scary that a lot of people wouldn't really consider that way, but for me, it deals with a lot more things that other vampire stories where they're just ghouls or just straight up demons. This shows that they do retain some of their humanity, and dealing with that is always not going to be the most simple thing there is. Number 6, I talked about Lovecraft already. This one hasn't changed. This is a returning one. This is The Color Out of Space. I thought very, 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 very hard about this, or At the Mountains of Madness, but this one still always will kind of take top space for me when it comes to H.P. Lovecraft, pun intended. I think with this one, you think of how many things have kind of copied this. Alien object lands on Earth and it starts to infect everyone around it. I think this was the first story I ever read that just had some of the most gruesome and horrifying body horror that you could imagine. So this guy is dealing with watching his family turn into just mutated monsters right in front of him and trying to wrestle with his sanity. And again, the biggest thing with Lovecraft is not, what you can see that's scary. It's the fear of the unknown. And this, you don't really know what's going on. And, what's the deal with the well? There's so many mystery wrapped around this. And I would say with Lovecraft, a lot of people will say, hey, why are you counting this? You say this is novels. Lovecraft stuff is, I feel like I do with Robert E. Howard, is you can kind of feel like it is a novel in like 15 or 20 pages because these guys are just able to pack so much into it. So I know this was kind of a cheat, you know, but I just can't not put it on here because it is one of the ones that really, really influenced me into everything that I like. And so many things have tried to copy this idea. I mean, you think about like Tommyknockers. There's so much stuff. It's just such an influential story, and it's just been parodied and copied and completely just made over and over and over again. And because it's just such an inspiring story, but it is very, very creepy, very, very messed up. And again, this was one of the first ones of H.P. Lovecraft where I was just like, well, I'm never going near a well again, you know? So, yeah, he knows how to push all the right buttons, and Color Out of Space will always be very, very hard to get off of this list. Headed into the top 5 now, so we got some changes from the previous list. This one was on there, but it's a little lower than it was on that list. This is Dracula by Bram Stoker. You might have heard of it. I think he's got a chance to be something in this industry. This is the first horror book that I ever read. I remember when I was kind of making my transition from, okay, well, I love sci-fi and fantasy, and I was kind of getting into like slasher films and stuff like that. And my brother, his library in his bedroom was just kind of my outlet to all these other worlds, you know. And I never ever thought, oh, Dracula, you know. I think that we always just kind of thought of Dracula as kind of like the campy, I want to suck your blood kind of thing, you know, as a kid growing up in the 80s. And then when I read this, I was just completely blown away. I'd never seen a story told in that format, you know, the epistolary format, you know, where everything is just strung together of like news clippings and journal entries and shipping logs and things like that to tell a story. But I love the way that Stoker was able to do that. And you could tell that when this was written, man, he was writing about stuff that was just quite taboo. You weren't supposed to be talking about those kind of things, you know, like the characters like just being hit with like instant lust and things like that just you didn't expect to see during that time period. But you know, it's a really cool story. It has like basically like the quest, you know, to go and stop Dracula. So you get like they round up this group of fighters to go and fight him, and you're just kind of, you know, on that side, and you're really just kind of rooting for Van Helsing the whole time. And I just love the kind of the team up that you get, and just kind of seeing these characters, you know, fall one by one in kind of the creepiest of ways. But I mean, Dracula, I mean, we're talking about maybe the greatest horror icon of all time, and it all started right here. And it's been copied and parodied and just done over and over and over and over and over again, because this is a character just like our fascination with him has never, ever left. And it's all because of this book right here, Mr. Bram Stoker. Absolute genius. Number 4, this one kind of climbed quite a bit. Reread it a couple years ago, and it was on my list last time, but it really, really rose up the ranks. This is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. And I think I read this as a teenager, and I really liked it. Read it again, obviously, as an adult, and I was just kind of blown away by just how much it shows that solitary can be some of the scariest stuff ever. You know, you start seeing things that aren't there, you know, because you need someone to talk to. You start doing things like that. But obviously, anytime you're dealing with vampires, scary vampires, not sexy vampires, those things can get very, very scary. But this book asks a lot of questions that I think will reveal a lot about yourself. And it's one of those books that makes you think in that regard. But this book, every single time, you know, it starts to get dark, the sun starts to go down, you start actually feeling for Robert Neville. Like, oh my God, is he going to make it one more night? Does he want to? It starts to ask those questions of, you know, do you want to live in this world where you're the last man on earth? So all those ideas of just solitary and knowing to talk to, and do I want to keep on living in a world such as this? Is there anyone else out there? To me, that makes it quite scary, even more so than just that there are killer vampires on the loose every single time the sun goes down. So amazing, amazing journey with that book. And like I said, the ending will have you asking so many questions, and you will just be like, I don't know where I stand on this. So it's very, very thought-provoking. And I think to get that out of what I call a horror book is something that's really, really special. And that's why it's kind of moved its way up the list here. This one, same spot it was in 2020, guys. Something Wicked, This Way Comes, by Ray Bradbury, number 3 overall. Read this when I was younger. This is very, very easy to see how influential that Greentown was for Castle Rock, for Stephen King. You can see so much things in this story that Stephen King was vastly, vastly influenced by. So stop me if you heard this one before. You got the 2 young boys coming of age in a small town when there's a creepy, creepy carnival comes in, and they gotta kind of try to find their way through this darkness of temptation, let's put it that way. But I think what I really appreciated rereading this a couple years ago was seeing things from the dad's point of view. And what I love about that is, we have so many fears, I think, as parents, fear that you're not going to be a good dad, fear that you're going to lose your children, things like that, fear that your kids are going to make all the wrong decisions. It's a constant battle with yourself, thinking that you're not doing enough. And I think the dad in this really does have so many of those things that I worry about, with my kids. And the thing is he's a little older, he had his kids a little later in life. I was 34 when my first kid was born, so not quite as old as he did, but it's one of those things that you just kind of think about, I'm never going to be quick enough, fast enough to be the dad that they want. I'm never going to make the right decisions. So those things can kind of be terrifying as a parent. But then, of course, you've got Mr. Dark, who's just one of the scariest villains that I've ever read in my life. And just this carnival. I mean, I've always found carnivals a little creepy, and this one just really plays off that. Now, another influence is I very much think that Dr. Sleep took a lot of stuff from this story, but that's a good thing. But also you have like the boys, where the younger one is afraid of the other kid, turning to the dark side. He feels like he's losing his friend. So it has so many of those themes that you will be kind of scared of as an adult, scared of as a child. And then you have just the straight blood-curdling scares in this book. There's some stuff in here that will really mess you up. But what's amazing about Ray Bradbury, one of the greatest writers ever, is he will be writing stuff that is absolutely horrifying. And you just be like, oh my God, that was beautifully written the way that he did that. So Bradbury was amazing. He really is. If you guys haven't read any Bradbury yet, please do so. And I think this is a great one to start with. Number 2, New Entrance. Can you believe it? This high on the list? Guys, this should be no-brainer because it was probably the biggest question I got on my 2020 list is, where is The Exorcist? Well, guys, I hadn't actually read it yet. I love the movies, one of my favorite movies of all time, as is The Godfather. So back-to-back, I read The Godfather and The Exorcist for the first time last year. What do you know? The source material is quite amazing. So The Exorcist is often cited as the best horror novel of all time. And I would not be upset if anybody's saying that. What really kind of amazed me, outside of, because it's a very faithful adaptation. It really is, going back and watching it. And it's what I love about the book was it was just so much more of a character study, on not just Reagan, but you go with Reagan's mom and obviously our father there. It really dives deep into the psyche of these characters and what they're going through. And to me, some of the scariest stuff is, look, again, I know I keep repeating this as a broken record guy, but this is where I am in my life, is as a parent seeing this stuff happening to your child and no one wants to help you. No one... Guys go to the doctor and you're like, oh my God, like my knee just like hurts. And they're like, well, we can't see anything wrong with it. So, it's just like, feels like no one will help you. Now, multiply that times 1 billion, like the power of the sun. Your daughter has got something seriously wrong with her. And the doctor's like, well, we don't know what it is. Good luck. And that's just watching her mental breakdown, what's going on. She's begging this priest to help her. And he's like, well, I can't actually do this, if not that. And it's very frustrating. But of course, obviously the scary stuff in this book, guys, is the actual possession of what is going on. Some of those scenes, the very famous scenes from the movie. Well, they're all in the book. And they are all very graphic and very disturbing. But this book, man, absolutely incredible. I flew through it. And as soon as I finished it, I was like, yeah, that's one of the best books ever written. No doubt, without a doubt. And it would be number 1 on this list if it wasn't maybe just for one little problem. My favorite author of all time. I do have several honorable mentions by Stephen King. So which one did I put at number 1? Well, guys, back-to-back champs. It by Stephen King is still my favorite horror novel of all time. What I love about this book, not just the coming of age, because I do love coming of age stories, and there's 7 of them in here. And I do love reading this as an adult, because when you read it when you're younger, you really like the kid's story, but you're kind of like, on the adult story, because you haven't had through a lot of those wars you have as an adult. I think when you go back and read it at my age, it absolutely blows you away, both storylines. But what this book is just so special when it comes to horror is it has a little something that freaks everyone out. Like, are you scared of germs? Are you scared of birds? Are you scared of spiders? Are you scared of like the Universal movie monsters? There's something for everyone outside of just a big scary clown. There is a scene in this book. Is it leeches? Do leeches creep you out? Because I will never ever go to a random refrigerator in the middle of the yard ever again. Let's put it that way. And to this day, guys, without a doubt, I still 45 years old, I'm a grown-ass man, I still we'll be walking on the street when we take our family walks at night, and I still will take the long way around sewer grate because of this book. I don't like to approach sinks too often because of this book. This book will mess you up in all of the best ways. But to me, it's like everybody just wants to say, look, I don't really think that one's scary because I think they've had so much overexposure to it. The movies brought so much more to it. People are like, oh yeah, I'm tired of scary clown kind of thing. There's tons more in this book than just the scary clown, because the way that he haunts each individual member of the Losers Club is just so memorable. And that's why I can never see myself replacing this, because it combines that and wraps it around coming of age, which I just can never, ever get enough of. And again, Stephen King, no matter how old he gets, he's still the master at writing the way that young children talk to each other. It never, ever feels like, we didn't talk like that when I was 11 years old. He just somehow gets it. Again, no matter how old he gets, he's just never, ever lost that way to show the way that children, especially boys, communicate with each other. Really, really great stuff. I know everybody likes to criticize that one part of it, and yeah, that's a black eye on this book. But you know what? 99.8% of this book, absolutely amazing and absolutely perfect. It's a story that I feel like is good for everyone. Sure, there's going to be some things that might be disturbing. Again, it's my favorite horror novel of all time. It's going to make you be like, oh my God, more than once. But to me, that is what makes it special. So guys, if you haven't read It by Stephen King, I have reviewed it 3 times on the channel because I love it so much. It is my second favorite book of all time, behind only Dune by Frank Herbert. So it would be hard for it not to be my favorite horror novel of all time. So 4 new entrants, 6 returning finalists, and a repeat champion. But guys, I do plan to update this list every other year going forward, because in case you haven't heard, I am going to be reading more horror on the channel here. I usually just keep it all for October, and I got to the point where I was like, I'm only reading like 4 or 5 new horror books per year. So I said, what I'm going to start doing is I want to get probably a few dozen new horror books in every single year. Not a few dozen, but about a dozen. Let's put it that way. I'd like to get about 1 a month or so, or probably just, 1 every other month, and then really kind of go heavy again in October. But I will be reading more horror on the channel pretty soon, so I'll feel like I have enough of a change to update this list, like I do my favorite fantasy series, which I do every other year. Maybe with this one, once I read more books, if some really, really impress me. So I won't make the list if I feel like not enough has changed. But if enough changes, I feel like I will update that list. But guys, as always, I would love to hear what your top 10 horror novels are of all time, as opposed to telling me why mine suck. But I know there'll be a little bit of that, or you'll just be upset that I won't put more than 1 author on my list. Again, that's just the rule that I like to use, because I do like to share the love a little bit. But guys, drop in the comments and let me know, and have yourselves an awesome and safe Halloween.